In the summer of 1976, deep inside the lower archives of the Uruk Museum in Baghdad, a dusty clay tablet was pulled from a forgotten storage box that had not been opened in years. The museum, located on the banks of the Tigris River and home to some of the world's most important Mesopotamian artifacts, held tens of thousands of objects recovered from ancient cities such as Uruk, Nippur, and Eridu. The tablet had been catalogued decades earlier as fragmentary and unimportant, the kind of artifact no senior translator considered worth the hours. It carried a faded inventory number and a brief note suggesting it had been recovered during excavations near the ruins of ancient Eridu in southern Iraq, one of the oldest cities ever built by human hands. For 43 years, through wars, political upheaval, museum relocations, and the looting that followed the invasion of Iraq in 2003, the tablet remained exactly where it had been left, hidden in the same crate, in the same basement, beneath layers of forgotten records and neglected collections. Then, on a quiet evening in October 2019, a junior researcher working a late shift opened that crate while conducting a routine inventory review. She was a graduate student finishing cataloging hours, someone who had spent 6 years studying archaic Sumerian inscriptions and some of the earliest forms of cuneiform writing ever discovered. When she turned the tablet over beneath the fluorescent lights of the archive room, she noticed something the original catalogers had completely missed. The tablet was neither broken nor partial. It was a complete document, written from corner to corner in a Sumerian dialect so ancient that many of the cuneiform signs no longer resembled the forms familiar to modern scholars. She photographed the tablet and carried copies of the images back to her small apartment in Baghdad. For the next 11 nights, she worked alone, comparing symbols, reconstructing grammar, and translating only the first 6 lines. Then she stopped. She did not return to the museum for 3 weeks. When she finally came back, she immediately requested a meeting with the chief curator. Years later, in a letter written to a colleague at the British Museum in London, she described what she told him. It is not a hymn, not a king list, not an economic record. It is a transcript. Someone wrote down exactly what he said, in the order he said it, while he was still saying it. The he she was referring to was Enki, the legendary Sumerian god associated with wisdom, creation, fresh water, and forbidden knowledge. The deity worshipped for thousands of years in Eridu, a city founded more than 6,000 years ago near the shores of the ancient Persian Gulf. According to Sumerian tradition, Enki shaped humanity from clay, taught mankind agriculture and irrigation, revealed the mysteries of mathematics and writing, mapped the heavens, and defied his own brother to save humanity from a catastrophic flood. And what she believed she had translated was something no scholar expected to find. Not a prayer, not a myth, not a legend, but a record of Enki's own voice during the final moments of contact between him and the human race. 7 statements, 7 sentences spoken in sequence, and then the closing of a door. But before we uncover what those 7 statements revealed, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy mysterious ancient discoveries, forgotten civilizations, and hidden historical secrets, please subscribe to the channel and help us reach 1,000 subscribers in the next few days. Your support helps us continue researching, translating, and bringing these extraordinary stories to life. Now let's continue. Tonight, we walk through every one of those 7 statements and translate, in plain language, what Enki actually said, what door he sealed behind him, what he was protecting us from, and why some researchers believe that door may be opening again in our own lifetime. Before we open the first statement, we have to understand who Enki actually was in the Sumerian record. Enki was the second son of Anu, the ruler of the Anunnaki Council. His older brother was Enlil, the strict administrator, the enforcer of council law, the one who decided humanity should be wiped out in the Great Flood. Enki was the opposite. Where Enlil was distant, Enki was close. Where Enlil saw humans as an experiment that had failed, Enki saw humans as a project that needed protection. The Sumerian texts call him by many names: the Lord of the Earth, the Lord of Sweet Waters, the Crafter, the Shaper. But the title that appears most often, the one closest to his actual function, is harder to translate cleanly. The literal Sumerian phrase means, the one who knows what is hidden. Enki was the keeper of secret knowledge. He held the records the council did not want released, the genetic templates that built the human form, the maps of the heavens, the equations of time, and the design of the gate. The gate is the part most readers skip over because, in the conventional translation, it is described as a literal door in his city of Eridu, a physical doorway. But the new translation, the one based on the 1976 tablet, makes it clear that the gate was something else entirely. The gate was a passage between this world and what the Sumerians called the upper waters. It was the door Enki used to come and go, the door the Anunnaki Council used to enter Earth and leave again. And in his final statement, before he closed it, Enki said something 19 translators have all agreed on. He said he was sealing it from the inside. The tablet was excavated in 1968 from a site in southern Iraq, near the ancient city of Eridu, Enki's city, where kingship descended from heaven, according to the king lists. The excavation was a salvage operation, rushed and underfunded. The tablet was logged as one of 43 items recovered from a single chamber, described in the field notes as ceremonial, located beneath the foundation of what had once been a temple platform. Of those 43 items, 41 were ordinary: pottery shards, broken bowls, and a copper pin. 2 were not. One was a small carved stone disc with markings that have never been published. The other was the tablet we are discussing tonight. Both items were transferred to Baghdad. The disc was lost during the looting of the museum in 2003. The tablet survived because it was in the basement, in a crate, in the wrong drawer. It survived by being forgotten. And it surfaced again only because a graduate student picked up the wrong box on the wrong night. And before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I'm about to tell you gets significantly darker. And I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete decoding of all 7 statements, the tablet numbers, the translated passages, the astronomical date Enki specified down to the degree, I put it all into a written document. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. And now, let's continue. The first statement is the one that breaks the conventional picture of Enki immediately. The literal translation reads, "We are not who you were told we are." In archaic Sumerian, the pronoun used is the collective form, referring to the Anunnaki as a whole. Enki is opening his final transmission by telling the human listener that the entire mythology, the entire framework humans had been given to understand the Anunnaki, was constructed. It was not a lie in the simple sense. It was a useful image, a shape humans could hold in their minds, a story that allowed cooperation between the Anunnaki Council and the early human cities. But it was not what the Anunnaki actually were. The new translation makes the next line unambiguous. Enki says the Anunnaki are not the originators. They are not the creators of the universe, not the gods in the sense humans came to use the word. They are, in his exact phrasing, the inheritors of what was already here. Someone else, or something else, built the structures the Anunnaki used: the gates, the technology, and the templates for biological life on Earth. The Anunnaki found those structures already in place when they arrived. They learned how to operate them. They became the administrators of a system they did not build. Enki, in the first statement, refers to the original builders only once. He calls them the ones who began. He does not name them. He does not describe them. The tablet contains no further information about who or what they were. What the first statement establishes is the basic correction. The Anunnaki are not the top of the hierarchy. There is something above them, and whatever is above them has been silent, absent, or hidden for a very long time. The second statement moves from theology to biology. Enki says, in the second statement, "You were not the first." The Sumerian word translated as first is specific. It does not mean first in time. It means first in sequence. There were earlier versions of the human form. The second statement specifies how many. There were 7 previous iterations of humanity before the version that exists today. Each iteration was a complete design. Each was attempted on Earth. Each failed in a specific way that Enki briefly describes. The first iteration failed because it could not reproduce. The second iteration could reproduce, but the offspring were not viable past the 3rd generation. The 3rd iteration was viable, but produced individuals so aggressive toward each other that the population collapsed within several centuries. The 4th iteration was peaceful, but lacked the cognitive capacity to operate the technology the Anunnaki tried to transfer. The 5th iteration had the cognition, but could not coordinate at scale. The 6th iteration could coordinate, but became collectively suicidal in ways the Anunnaki did not fully understand and could not correct. The 7th iteration is the one Enki spends the most time on in the second statement. The 7th iteration was, by every measurable criterion, successful. It reproduced, it coordinated, it built, it operated the technology. It was peaceful, cognitively capable, socially stable, and biologically robust. The 7th iteration was retired anyway. Enki does not say why. The second statement closes on a single line. The 8th is what remains. We are the 8th iteration. According to the second statement, we are not an improvement on the 7th. We are the version that came after the version that worked. The third statement is the one that has caused the most disagreement among the translators. The literal phrase is, "The great water was not punishment. It was maintenance." The conventional reading of the Sumerian flood narrative has always been that the gods, primarily Enlil, decided to destroy humanity because of human misbehavior. The new translation contradicts that reading directly. The flood, according to the third statement, was a scheduled event. It was part of a maintenance cycle, a periodic reset of the biosphere that the Anunnaki Council had performed on Earth multiple times before, on every previous iteration. The flood was not a response to human behavior. It was a calendar event. The behavior of the 8th iteration was, in this reading, irrelevant. The flood would have come regardless. What was unusual about the flood that affected the 8th iteration was not the flood itself, but Enki's response to it. Enki broke council law. The third statement contains a phrase translated as, "I was instructed to allow it. I instead instructed Ziusudra." Ziusudra is the Sumerian name for the figure later remembered in the Hebrew Bible as Noah. The third statement confirms what the older flood narratives implied, but never stated clearly. The flood was supposed to end the 8th iteration. Enki saved it by warning one human family. That warning was a violation of the Council's standing order. It was, according to Enki, the first time he acted against the Anunnaki Council in any meaningful way. And it was, the third statement implies, the act that set in motion everything that followed. The fourth statement is where the tablet shifts from history into something personal. The fourth statement is the only one in the entire transmission where Enki speaks in the first person, without referring to the council, without referring to humans collectively, and without referring to any external party at all. He speaks only about himself. The literal translation reads, "I broke the law of the council to save you, and I will not be allowed to return." This is the line that broke the graduate student translator's composure during her first pass. The line is not in any other surviving Sumerian text. It does not appear in any of the standard mythological cycles. It is, as far as anyone has been able to determine, the only place in the Sumerian record where Enki speaks plainly about the consequences of saving humanity from the flood. The consequences, according to the fourth statement, were permanent. The council closed the gate against him. He was, in Enki's own words, "The door I am sealing was sealed against me first." The fourth statement contains a passage the translator has flagged as particularly difficult. The closest English rendering is, "I knew what I was doing. I knew what it would cost. I did it anyway." This is not the voice of a god in the conventional sense. It is the voice of someone making a deliberate sacrifice and acknowledging it. The fourth statement is also where Enki names the council members who voted against him. The names are recognizable. They are the senior Anunnaki figures, whose names appear elsewhere in the Sumerian record. Enki names 7 of them. He says they voted unanimously to exile him from the gate. He says the vote was held in his absence. He says the decision was final. Before we move on to the next statement, stop for a second. What you just heard, this fourth statement, was actually the original turning point in the tablet. The translator's notes called it the pivot. And what's coming after this, in the 5th, 6th, and 7th statements, is where it gets really uncomfortable. So, before that, if you want to support more of this work and want me to keep digging into the cuneiform record, please consider supporting the channel by joining our exclusive membership. The link is in the description, and the join button is right below this video. Members get the full unedited translations, the source photos of the tablet, and the astronomical calculations the 3 anonymous astronomers shared. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the script. The 5th statement opens with a phrase that has been translated identically in every version since the first attempt in 1892. The phrase is, "What is taught cannot be untaught." In the older translations, this was assumed to be a reference to general wisdom. The new translation specifies what Enki was actually talking about. He was talking about specific knowledge, specific bodies of knowledge that he personally transmitted to humans during the time he lived in Eridu. The 5th statement lists them in the order he gave them. First, the cultivation of grain, the breeding of wheat from wild grasses, the calendar of planting, and the method of irrigation. He gave this knowledge to a group of priests in southern Mesopotamia, and they passed it forward without ever knowing where it came from. Second, the working of metal, copper, then bronze, then iron in that order. Taught not as random discoveries, but as steps in a sequence Enki already knew. Third, the construction of cities, the design of streets, the management of water, the storage of grain across seasons, and the writing system needed to track ownership. Fourth, the observation of the heavens, the cycles of the moon, the positions of the planets, and the precession of the constellations across the great year. Fifth, and this is where the new translation differs from every previous reading, the management of the human lifespan. Enki claims in the 5th statement that he taught humans how to extend their lives, not in the form of immortality, but in the form of a specific dietary and behavioral pattern that, if followed, would have allowed humans to live for several hundred years.